Today we will be talking about Xinjiang, and I think we have more material than the time allowed, so we will go through it quite quickly. Now, this is the map of China, and the red part is the Xinjiang region. So you see, Xinjiang is not small. Xinjiang is quite a large area. Actually, it might be the largest province of China. It is divided into approximately 3 regions, the northern region, which is in yellow, and then the Tuban area, which is in red, and then is the Tervi Basin, which is in blue. Or traditionally, we will combine the red and the yellow into so-called the northern Xinjiang, and then the blue part being the southern Xinjiang. Xinjiang is officially also known as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. It is obviously an autonomous region in the PRC, the People's Republic of China, located in the northwest of the country, close to the central area. Before we start with people talking about Afghanistan. Afghanistan share a small border with the Xinjiang region. The border is about 69 kilometers in length. So it's not a large area in terms of border, but it do share a border with Afghanistan. So Xinjiang borders with countries like Mongolia, Russia, Kazakhstan, I can't pronounce all these words, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India. The terrain is pretty rough. Only about 9.7% of the area is for human habitation. But although the area is so small, but it's one of the largest agricultural province of China. It actually produces quite a bit of agricultural product, including cotton and tomato.
Lauren, just a bit quiet, yeah?
You can mute yourself so that the noises doesn't come through, okay? Places similar in size to Xinjiang include the Gulf of Mexico in American, or the Algeria in Afghan, or the France, which is, you can see it is a pretty large area compared with a lot of other countries. This is just a province. There are many ethnic groups traditionally in this land, including Uyghurs, which is 2 different kinds. I use kinds, okay. And the Han and Tibetans, who Turks, Mongols, Russians, and so on. There's a dozen of autonomous prefectures and counties in the Xinjiang region. So calling it the Uyghurs Autonomous Region is not exactly accurate, although the Uyghurs do represent quite a large percentage of the population in Xinjiang. The Kurdic peoples, meaning those who speak Kurdic language, from the recent linguistic and genetic or agricultural evidence suggests that these people were descended from the agricultural communities in the northeastern China or wider Northeast Asia, which moved westward into Mongolia in about 3rd millennium BC. So they were there for a long time. They were there for about 5,000 years up to now, and they adopted a pastoral lifestyle. By the 1st millennium BC, these people has become nomads, and then in subsequent centuries, they spread throughout the stable area and up to Mongolia and so forth. So this region has been there for a long time. This is how they probably look like. The Uyghurs is a Turkish ethnic group originally from and culturally affiliated with the general region of the Central and East Asia. The Uyghurs are recognized as native to Xinjiang, and therefore there's a huge autonomous region dedicated to that. They are considered to be one of the China's 55 officially recognized ethnic minorities. The Uyghurs are recognized by the Chinese government as a regional minority of the people in Xinjiang. Throughout the world, the Uyghur peoples have about 13.5 million people in population, and about 12.8 million are in China's Xinjiang. The rest is almost the rounding numbers. For example, Pakistan has about 223,000 compared to 12.8 million. So most of them basically are in China. And of course, the list haven't finished yet. There are smaller population of Uyghurs in the rest of the world, but they are much, much smaller in numbers. So most of them are in China. This is one of the traditional way of making bread. They have a oven in the ground, and then obviously they will heat up the oven, and then the bread stick to the side of the oven. So this is a typical bakery in Uyghur region. Obviously today they are not doing it in this way. But this is a traditional baker in Xinjiang. These are the children in the Uyghur family. The Uyghur children. They not all of them look the same. I find it quite different look. And this is one of the bazaar area, meaning the market, and the market in the Xinjiang region.
When was this taken, Albert? When was this photo taken?
I think in the 2000 around year 2000. And later on, we'll show you a bit more recent videos. There are also children there. Come on. Sorry for that. Okay, now, and then going back here. This is in the early 1900s. So these are black and white photographs. And on the left is the Uyghurs today, and on the right are the Uyghurs according to BBC.
Hello.
So
hi, Shirley's gone out and I'm just on a Zoom, so I won't talk. I'll tell her you rang, yeah? Hi. Hi.
Peter, can you
okay.
switch your mute on, Pete, off? Yes. Can you mute yourself, Peter?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, the religion, most Uyghurs are primarily Muslim. They were the second largest predominant Muslim ethnicity in China after the who is a purely Muslim society. The majority of the modern Uyghurs are Sunnis, although additional conflicts exist between different religious orders. And Uyghurs consider Islam to be part of their identity. Religious also observance obviously varies between different regions. Okay, let a modern YouTuber explain that to you.
Hey folks, now we all know that mistakes were made in China and the way religious people were treated, you know, especially during the Cultural Revolution with the Gang of Four. A lot of the way that people who practiced their religion were treated was just wrong. And it wasn't just Muslims. It was, you know, Roman Catholics, Buddhists, other religious groups in China faced, you know, mistreatment by the Chinese Communist Party. And the Chinese Communist Party has been very, very open about the mistakes that were made during that time, and they've tried to correct them. And, you know, that's not to say that there aren't mistakes that still go on, right? And that the issue of how religion is treated in China is constantly in flux. We've recently seen a rapprochement between the Vatican and Beijing, and some friendly relations established there. But regardless, there are a lot of forces that are talking about what's going on with the Uyghurs in China. And a lot of what they're saying can't be confirmed, right? A lot of these reports that we're seeing say a lot of really, really intense things. But if you dig a little bit deeper, the only source is some think tank or some institute or some policy source that's linked to Saudi Arabia. We're seeing a lot of personal accounts from people. People are saying, well, I was here, I saw this, and they're all over Western media making their claim. And if you look a little deeper, these are people that are just anti-China activists that have an axe to grind. And a lot of them are linked to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which really has no grounds to ever lecture anyone on human rights. So a lot of this needs to be taken with a grain of salt. And there's a lot of things that aren't being reported on. For example, in the Uyghur regions, there's been a huge amount of economic development. The Chinese government has gone in there and started, raising people up out of poverty. They've been building infrastructure. They've been increasing the level of employment, making sure there's good jobs there. And furthermore, what you're definitely not hearing in the media reports is how the Chinese government has been promoting Islam, right? In the Uyghur regions, the Chinese government has been sponsoring the construction of seminaries and mosques. They've been, giving platforms to imams. They've been doing a lot to promote Islam in the Uyghur provinces, but promote Islam that is not, anti-communist, Islam that doesn't call for the violent overthrow of the Chinese government, but Islam that is, sensible, moderate Islam that is not the kind of thing that is being promoted by these extremists. And there is a real fear of extremists. Read about these knife attacks that have happened in China, where people get on trains and pull out knives and just start killing people in big numbers. They have a real fear. Seems pretty clear to me that there are some forces in the world today that are very, very determined to stop what China is doing around the world. The fact that China is doing the Belt and Road Initiative, building infrastructure in developing countries, raising people up out of poverty, this is a threat to the monopolies, the big bankers that control the world. They keep the world poor so that they can stay rich. China is challenging that global order. They are raising people up out of poverty. And a central part of China's Belt and Road Initiative is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor that is opening up. This is huge. China and Pakistan are cooperating like never before. All kinds of construction projects, all kinds of efforts to really just light up that whole region. It's big. And it's pretty clear that Saudi Arabia and Wall Street and London want to stop the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And so they're doing everything they can to try and incite Muslims around the world to hate China. That's basically what they're doing. All kinds of efforts are being made to get Muslims around the world to hate China. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't mistakes that are being made, and we're not on the ground. We don't know what's happening. But a lot of the things we're seeing in American media, they're very, very sensational. Meanwhile, China is actually doing a lot to improve the lives of people in the historically Islamic regions, giving them opportunities, giving them job training, building seminaries and mosques, providing economic opportunity. And that's the side of the story that definitely isn't being told. And a lot of the accounts we're hearing are very sensational and can't completely be verified. So I urge people to just calm down, right? I urge people to just calm down. Let's try to get to the facts. Let's try to find out what's actually happening. And let's remember that the way to stop terrorism is with jobs and schools and housing, right? People turn to terrorism just like they turn to drugs and the drug narcotics trade. They turn to that when they don't have other options. And what China is doing in the world today by building infrastructure, building trains and airports and hospitals and schools, this is really important. This is the way to get out of terrorism. The fact that China has a program in Afghanistan where they're enabling children to get operations and surgeries they wouldn't be able to get by just going over the Chinese border. The fact that China is trying to give port access to Afghanistan so that Afghanistan can have manufacturing jobs, this landlocked country in Central Asia, this is all unprecedented. China is basically paving the way for a world where we don't have terrorism and drugs and the horrors that we're seeing. The China plan with Iran about trade and transport for Afghanistan to bring opportunities to Afghanistan to stop the drug trade, that's huge, right?
Okay, obviously, this YouTuber is not in China. Look at the background images, okay? So let's hear some people who are in China and let them say what they're really observing.
Hello guys, Alex here. So I'm now at Grand Bazaar of Urumqi. And let me show you the view here. Check this tower out. Check this out. How beautiful it is, right? It's very tall. Because today is the festival of breaking the fast. So I'm here to, to experience the atmosphere of the festival and maybe talk to some people and ask them about their experience during the festival. As you can see, a lot of people here. To be honest, I don't know too much about Ad or what we call it, Rosa here in Xinjiang. And the term Rosa is actually originated from Persian language, which means fast. So in Xinjiang, we just say 肉自节, so it's different with the Arabic term, all right? Here in Xinjiang, not only Uyghur people are celebrating this festival, but also Kazakh, Hui Muslims, and other Muslim minorities, and of course, Han Chinese are also. It's a festival to all Xinjiang people, in my opinion. It's a public holiday here in Xinjiang, not only to Muslims but also to Han Chinese. It's a public holiday. So join me, guys. Let's wander around this Grand Bazaar of Urumqi.
How many people, eh?
Look at this. Look at how bustling and vibrant it is. This is all a Uyghur style. Your hat? Maybe I'll get one. It's not actually round shape. It's kind of rectangle shape. What you reckon? Looking good? I don't know. Anyway, I'll get one.我也只会说一点点。你是新疆，你是乌鲁木齐的吗？他是萨克省。哦，他是。来乌鲁木齐旅游是吧？来乌鲁木齐工作了。哦。Rosa is her Mubarak process. 谢谢。说一点点。谢谢。All right, guys, what's your account? I might look like a Uyghur man. Yeah. I love it. Wow, what are they doing here? It's gonna be a performance here, dancing performance? I'm not sure. Let's join them, guys. Well, dancing here, right? Check this out. Maybe his friends is encouraging him to dancing there.
Okay, let's look at another video. Obviously, from this video, we see people wearing masks. Therefore, it has to be taken either last year or this year, okay, 2020 or 2021. So it should be the recent street view of Yuguchi in Xinjiang. So we noticed they like dancing in the public space, and this is a celebration of their breaking of the feast. So obviously this is a Muslim festival, and you can see the Xinjiang people there openly celebrate their religious holiday.
Hi, I'm Gu Li. I live in Xinjiang, China. If you want to know anything about Xinjiang, please comment and let me know. I will answer it for you. Recently, I saw some comments. Many people said that I am a fake Uyghur. Yeah, the reason for the judgment were I have tattoos. They doubt I can speak Uyghur, and they say I have a Han Chinese look. Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about the tattoos first. I think these people must have confused the concept. In their perceptions, Uyghur people, they must believe in Islam. But what I want to say is that this is not the case. We have freedom to believe in religion, and as well as we also have freedom to not believe in religion. For example, I don't have religion, so tattooing it's like a very common thing for me. Then I want to talk about the language. I can speak English, I can speak Mandarin, and of course I can speak Uyghur. But I only speak Uyghur when I communicate with my parents and my Uyghur friends. Then I will also teach you guys some commonly used Uyghur. By the way, yeah, when you say hi, you can say yaximsiz, which means like hello, how do you do? And to praise a girl for being beautiful, you can say which means you are so beautiful. And I like you in Uyghur is ben sizni yaxshi görmen. Like other places in China, Mandarin is also a compulsory language for us, and it's spoken in the most occasions. China has a vast territory and many dialects. Only by promoting and learning Mandarin can eliminate the dialect barrier. So we can have more job opportunities, we can communicate with each other. This is the same as many Chinese learning English. Just like I can introduce my hometown to the world in English, I feel that there is no contradiction between I learning English or Mandarin and passing on the language of my own nation.
Nice.
Well, at last, the question about I look like a Han Chinese. yeah, this is actually such a misunderstanding in China. Many people from other parts of China, they think Uyghur girls are the same as Dilraba and the Gulnazar. But in fact, Uyghur people have a various looks. And there's like this, and this, and this. They are all my Uyghur friends. Therefore, I hope this video can give everyone a better understanding of the Uyghurs. Yeah, please remember to give me a thumbs up and subscribe my channel.
So the Uyghur language. We see in this particular photo, this is the entrance to a train station, and then obviously under here is Chinese. Above the Chinese, these words here are Uyghurs, because this is a photo of a train station in the Xinjiang region. And then down there is English. So it is in 3 different languages. This is another train station, and these 4 characters are in Chinese, and then over here are the Uyghurs language as well. Again, this is a train station in Xinjiang, and therefore they have 2 different languages. And on the left here are the $10 nooks and the $5 nooks for the renminbi. You see in the circle there, there's a Uyghur people there. And then you look at the corner of the Chinese money, we have different languages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there's at least 5 different languages here, and telling you what this is. Okay. So this is the $10 looks. This is the $5 looks. This is the entrance, automatic check-in. So you are going into the train station, platform A10 and platform A11. So again, you can see the Chinese here, English in the bottom, and on top of the Chinese, there is the Uyghur language there. So people saying Chinese is having a civilization genocide, killing off the minor languages. That's not true. Again, this is the smaller denominators of the money. This one here is $1. This one is $2. And these smaller nooks is no longer being used because they are just much smaller. This is 50 cents one, and this one and that one is the same. Oh, sorry, I can keep moving. And this one and that one is the $2 nooks. The red and the red are the $1 nooks, and we have seen the $10 nooks already. So there are actually multiple languages on the Chinese official currency. I don't think there's a lot of countries like China with their currency having multiple languages. So that is quite unique in terms of China. Okay, in terms of music, let me play you some of Uyghur's music. Pretty loud and pretty happy song, and I think the beat is very strong. I don't know how typical that Uyghur songs is, and I don't ask me about the name of these instruments. I don't know. I just got a music downloaded from the internet, and they say this is Uyghur's music. I quite enjoy this one myself, actually.
Actually, it reminded me of Bollywood, all the dancing and the music.
Okay, let me introduce you to another Uyghur girls.
I want to answer a question from in the comments. Can foreigners travel to Xinjiang? Of course, Xinjiang does not have any restrictions to foreigners. As long as you have a passport and a Chinese visa, you can come to Xinjiang anytime. I know foreigners need to apply for a permit when they go to Tibet, but you don't need to consider this issue when you come to Xinjiang. Not long ago, I accompanied a group of foreign friends to visit southern Xinjiang, and some of them are were from Germany, and some were from Ghana, and some were from India. And I also talked with Patrick, who from Germany, about some feelings of trip in Xinjiang.
So I love to talk to all the people, and I just go on the street in Xinjiang like I do it in my own videos, and just talk to people, and people just talk back, and they like actually. They
so
like that I
nice.
talk to them.
Yeah,
So,
they're so friendly, right?
That's why when foreign media say something bad, I don't know. I think it's not really good.
On Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, you also see many travel photos and videos taken by foreigners in Xinjiang. This handsome British guy wrote on his Twitter, met some really friendly Uyghurs in Xinjiang today, and they said that they are very happy and safe here. And I was the first foreigner they have met, so they wanted a photo. And this is Noli, a Singapore vlogger. He shared a video that he traveled to Xinjiang on his YouTube channel.
Pasture. Let me show you if I can. This. Look at all these children. They're so cute. Hello.
给我们拍这儿吧。
对，我拍你们好不好？你们很可爱。
大家都知道火车是。
跟大家说个好，说个 hello 啊。啊，跟相机说啊，说 hello， 要不要说？你好。
我知道是火车啥意思。
From his video, I believe that he must spend a very good time in Xinjiang. Now I'm at the International Grand Bazaar in Urumqi. I used to see many foreign tourists here, but because of the epidemic, I rarely see tourists from other countries. I believe that in the near future, when the world returns to normal, many people from other countries will travel to Xinjiang. Well, at that time, we'll warmly welcome to everyone to come to Xinjiang. Xinjiang has a lot of beautiful scenery, a lot of cuisines, and a lot of beautiful women and handsome guys. Okay, looking forward to meeting you guys here. Bye bye.
Okay, hello guys. So we are heading to Grand Bazaar, Xinjiang. Urumqi Grand Bazaar. So it's like about 6 kilometers away from our hostel, and we're taking the bus right now. So this is the condition, and I don't get a seat, but I am just fine. So I think the price for the public buses is quite cheap. Not really cheap, but half from the price in Beijing. So it's cheaper. Sekarang kita orang berturut tiba-tiba dari bahasa Inggeris ke bahasa Melayu. So kita mau turun bus and nak pergi International Grand Bazaar. Kat situ kot. This one, alamak, tak nampak lah. Wanginya bau. Bau daging kambing. Wow. Sabar nak makan. Guys, sekarang dah pukul 8.30. Tak. 8.30 tapi masih cerah lagi sebab sekarang summer kot. So isyak dia akan masuk pukul 12 malam dan maghrib dia akan masuk pukul 9.55. Lambat gila. And sekarang masih cerah lagi. So kita nak pergi cari dinner.
Okay, these guys obviously either coming from Malaysia or Indonesia. So some of the language she speak, I don't understand. She switched between one other language and the English. So I don't really understand everything she said. But anyway.
Malay.
Malay, okay. At least you can see a few glimpses of the street view as she captured it from out on their butts. And look at here, it is obviously one of the very common street views in China. So not all street view is just beautiful. Some of these look like that as well, just like any other any other city.
China, you are committing a genocide against Uyghurs. Look at all these concentration camps we found on Google Map.
These are education centers. Terrorism and extremism are a real problem in Xinjiang. We believe communication and education is the best way to resolve it.
I call bullshit. Unless you are at the Mexico borders, putting people in camps is a violation of human rights. You should have declared a war like us. Bomb the shit out of them, causing over 100,000 civilian deaths over a duration of 8 years instead. Do the right thing.
We really think providing them with jobs is a far better way. Xinjiang now produces world-class cotton.
You are busted. What's cotton made of? Forced labor. We were the expert.
We don't do that here. It is standard practice to use machinery nowadays. Much more efficient and profitable.
We have proof. We have interviewed the same Uyghur women over and over again. She has accused you of genocide every time. This can't be a coincidence.
Is there a possibility that she might be lying?
How dare you to say something like that? Crying woman never lies.
In our defense, citizens of Xinjiang have testified that this so-called genocide is only a rumor.
This must be a forced testimony.
We have also invited you and the United Nations to visit Xinjiang. Just come and see if people are happy there.
It is pointless. Uyghurs can't possibly be happy in China. This is forced celebration, forced dancing, forced happiness. Just like how we found weapon of mass destruction in Iraq.
Sir, we didn't find any.
Just shut the fuck up and put up the slides.
Yes, sir.
Anyways, there are these very credible documents from this totally undisclosed source of ours. It's all written here. China violated human rights. Genocide. John, get your ass back in here. These are photos of Muslims from Gaza.
Sorry, sir. They all look alike, sir.
We don't care about them unless they have oil. Or they live in China. And maybe Russia. Get your shit together or I'll defund you.
Sorry, sir.
Let's get back to Xinjiang. Wrong slides again. John.
Sorry, sir.
God damn it. There. China, you are committing a genocide against Uyghurs.
Obviously, this is a parody. So why are Western media so unfair on China? Let's compare a direct by New Zealand media.
Hi, hello and welcome to another video by Fair.
Sorry,
My name is Fernando Munoz
not...
Bernal, and today I am in Kashgar.
No, I think I will come back to you if we have time. Okay, so here, this one. He is from New Zealand. Let's hear what he said first.
Hey you guys, welcome back to Reports on China. I'm Andy. Today I'll compare Western media reports on China's zero-tolerance Delta lockdowns and Western media reports on New Zealand's zero-tolerance Delta lockdowns before attempting to answer the fundamental question. Why are Western media so unfair on China? Let's get reporting.
Hey, I'm Andy. I've always been obsessed with media. I started my own neighbourhood newspaper at 10 and my own TV channel at 15. At 19, I launched a national magazine that was available all over New Zealand. I worked for New Zealand politicians for a few years before our Prime Minister gave me a scholarship to come to China and study a master's degree in Chinese language and culture. I decided to stay, and now I'm a columnist and filmmaker in Shanghai. Come with me as I analyse how the world reports on China.
Both China and New Zealand have enforced strict lockdowns recently over the Delta variant of COVID-19, with New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern this week announcing the entire country would enter the highest level of lockdown following the discovery of a single case, the country's first in 6 months. But first, don't forget to hit like or leave a comment to help more people see this video, and follow Andy's Shanghai Life if you're outside mainland China. 如果你在中国大陆的话，请点个赞、写条评论和关注一下绿眼睛 Andy， 谢谢啊。New Zealand's level 4 lockdown means everyone must stay home and all businesses and schools must close their doors, apart from essential services. Anyone leaving home to perform urgent tasks must ensure 2 meters distance from others and wear masks at all times. This is almost exactly the same approach taken in many cities across China over the past few weeks, after Delta first appeared in the southern city of Nanjing and spread to dozens of other cities and provinces. So can you guess which country's stance was labelled draconian by Western media? Let's just say it wasn't New Zealand, but you already knew that. Western media have one English word they love to use a lot when speaking about China's response to COVID-19, draconian. Here are some quick recent examples. First up, The Hollywood Reporter, of all publications, pulled out the D word when speaking of the postponement of the Beijing International Film Festival. The Beijing International Film Festival, the Chinese government's flagship cinema event, has been postponed amid a resurgence in COVID-19 cases in the country, caused by the spread of the Delta variant, the article begins. Now, pretty much everyone on the entire planet knows that COVID-19, and especially the Delta variant, is easily passed on in crowded spaces. So postponing large-scale events sounds like a great idea. In fact, The Hollywood Reporter even admit that North America still contends with pandemic-era aversion to cinemas, which suggests that even Americans are avoiding cinemas over COVID fears. Why then do they see the need to pull out the D word as they end the article? Most cinemas across China remain in operation, the article ends. But the fresh outbreak and Beijing's draconian measures to contain it have many in the industry on edge over the potential for another broad shutdown. This should leave many scratching their heads, since the closure of large-scale events amid fresh outbreaks, in the eyes of the average person, is anything but draconian. But Western media have been given a free pass to use such loaded adjectives flippantly and at will. The Sydney Morning Herald's Stephen Bartholomew says, "The world is watching as China's Delta outbreak hits an already vulnerable economy." There has been a new wave of infections across China since last month's outbreak in Nanjing, he writes, which the authorities have responded to with lockdowns, travel restrictions, and limits on entertainment and large gatherings. Sounds pretty reasonable to me, but then he pulls out the D word. A number of conferences and other major events have been cancelled as the authorities roll out the draconian playbook they so successfully used to get last year's outbreak under control. Again, it seems like anything the Chinese government does, no matter how reasonable, is fundamentally draconian, according to Western media. The Washington Post claimed that China's Delta outbreak is testing the limits of its zero-tolerance approach. Now, keep in mind that New Zealand also has a zero-tolerance approach, which basically means that both countries have decided their strategy is to have 0 cases and not to live with the virus, as the USA, UK, and other nations have suggested. But as we'll see shortly, the treatment from Western media is blatantly contradictory when reporting on China. China's commitment to a zero-tolerance approach for coronavirus infections may be starting to fray, the article starts, before quoting a so-called expert who claims, "There's a growing set of public health experts and policy scholars that's beginning to question the wisdom of the government's draconian approach." If they don't use the D word, Western media love to use other adjectives to describe China's action against COVID. The New York Times say that after months as a COVID success story, China tries to tame Delta, where they attack the country's zero-tolerance approach, despite its clear success. While the number of cases in China is still relatively low compared to the United States and elsewhere, the article says, these new outbreaks may undermine the ruling Communist Party's argument that its authoritarian style has been an unquestionable success in the pandemic. Interesting. CNN called China's response dramatic. China's worst coronavirus outbreak in a year has authorities taking dramatic measures to stamp out new infections, they say. Well, if you ask the average Chinese what's more dramatic, I'm sure they'd say it's the 623,000 deaths in the USA from COVID-19. Now let's take a look at Western media reports on New Zealand's national lockdown after a single case was discovered early this week. Let's start with CNN, who we saw just called China's lockdowns dramatic. In their article, New Zealand announces it's locking down the entire country over one COVID case. CNN have decided to err on the side of professional journalism and remain neutral by avoiding adjectives to describe the New Zealand government's measures in the first paragraph, where they say, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has announced a nationwide lockdown after the country confirmed one coronavirus case. Perhaps completely unsurprisingly, there's no draconian or dramatic or authoritarian descriptors, and they even go on to applaud New Zealand's success so far. New Zealand has been praised for its handling of the virus, which saw it close borders to almost all foreign nationals early and impose strict state-run quarantines on incoming travellers. That approach has seen it avoid the devastating outbreaks seen in other countries, and prior to Tuesday's announcement, life in the country had largely returned to normal. Wow, that sounds exactly like the situation in China. Reuters called it a strict lockdown, mentioning that Prime Minister Ardern's strategy has helped curb COVID-19, before pointing out that under the level 4 lockdown, people must stay at home, leaving only for essential services. Protective face masks should be worn at all times when leaving home. Again, this is nearly exactly the same situation as some Chinese cities after cases of the Delta variant popped up in recent weeks. But there are absolutely zero instances of words like draconian, dramatic, or authoritarian when describing New Zealand locking down an entire country after one case was found in one city. The Washington Post, who called China's response draconian, albeit through a quote, mentioned New Zealand's situation before going on to call the country something of a pandemic star for its success in suppressing the virus. Now, this is interesting because, again, New Zealand uses very similar methods as China, closed borders and strict government-run quarantine for those allowed to enter the country. So why are reports on China's response, despite being very similar to New Zealand's, so different? Well, I would argue it comes down to three things: cultural proximity, the fundamentally negative basis of Western mainstream media, and good old racism. I'll explain all of these briefly. First up, cultural proximity is the idea that certain nations share very similar cultures, ideals, and beliefs, right down to using the same language. Because Anglo nations speak English, place so-called democracy on a pedestal, and enjoy similar foods, it's easier to relate to others within the group. This allows for Anglo-Western media in New Zealand, Australia, the US, Canada, and the UK, despite often being separated by huge distances, to view countries within the group in a favourable light, even when they act in the same way as outside nations who are criticised for their actions. Case in point, New Zealand and Chinese responses to Delta outbreaks. On the flip side, people outside that group are often given different treatment, whether consciously or subconsciously. Next up, it's important to keep in mind the fundamentally negative basis of Western media. News media in the West is often referred to as the fourth estate, which basically means it's unofficially seen as a fundamental part of the political process, whose primary role is to hold the government to account by purposefully seeking out examples where governments or government officials have acted badly. This stretches all the way to public life, where all and any kind of bad news has become, in a way, the only thing that is newsworthy. Western readers, by and large, demand bad news from Western media, and one of the easiest ways to achieve that is to create an enemy, which leads to the last point, racism. Western media has the propensity to other cultures and peoples who are not part of the Anglo sphere, positioning them as somehow inferior and fundamentally inadequate, even when they act in basically the same way. This is especially evident when it comes to Asian peoples, whereby Western powers have historically seen the Eastern world as somehow primitive and inferior when measured against superior civilizations like the West. This has been referred to as Orientalism, and it's clearly alive and well in Western media and how they report on China, where everything has to have a negative spin, and every report, even those detailing positive stories from China, like the lifting of hundreds of millions from poverty, the way China has dealt with COVID-19, or China's massive efforts to preserve the environment, is twisted in order to paint China in a negative, or in the very least, inferior light. The scary thing is that a lot of the process of othering groups of people, including Orientalism, is done subconsciously, which means that even many of the reporters writing such content may well be completely unaware of their own biases, and probably see their points of view on China as a matter of absolute fact. It's important to remember, though, it's not just Western journalists doing this. It's also the consumers of Western media who demand conflict and bad news on a daily basis. China has become an easy and plentiful source of negative news for Western media to feed their hungry readers.
I don't know whether you agree with him, but anyway, I think he do have a point.
Hello everybody, welcome to Talk It Out with me, Li Jingjing. So today my guest is Carlos Martinez from London. He is the organizer of No Cold War campaign. Today we're going to talk about many issues, his personal experience traveling across China, anti-China propaganda in the West, and the reason of founding No Cold War campaign.
Thanks very much, Jingjing, for having me on the show. My name is Carlos Martinez. I'm based in London, England. I'm an activist and campaigner and writer and researcher. I'm one of the founders of the No Cold War campaign.
And you don't think that China is like authoritarian, ruthless, cruel regime that oppress people?
No, I mean, this is a caricature. This is what you think about China if all you came across was kind of the Western media portrayal. I went to China myself in December 2019 for 3 weeks as part of a Silk Road tour, actually. So a few of us went to Beijing, to Xi'an, to Dunhuang, to Urumqi. You know, there were some of us on the tour from Britain, from London, some from the US, different places in the US, but mainly New York and Chicago. And I think everybody was really struck by how modern and how clean and how nice the Chinese cities are and how good the quality of life is. One thing that really struck us immediately was that you can walk around Beijing all day to different suburbs and you won't see homelessness. You won't see people who don't have access, you know, to anywhere to live. Whereas if you were to go to New York and step on the metro at any station, you will immediately see numerous homeless people. In New York City alone, which is not a massive city, there are literally tens of thousands of people who don't have anywhere to live. So it's incredible to see a place like Beijing or Xi'an or Guangzhou or Shanghai, which are part of the developing world, but they've been able to solve a major problem that faces humanity. And my father's from India. I've been to Delhi many times. I've been to Mumbai. I've been to Cochin and other cities in India, and the picture's completely different because you see very stark poverty. So yeah, it was really interesting to go to China, and I would strongly encourage people to visit China because what you see in reality was 100% different from the portrayal that you get if you read the BBC or if you read The Guardian or if you watch Sky News or whatever. For example, we went to Xinjiang, we went to Urumqi. We walked freely around Urumqi and also the Muslim quarter in Xi'an. We certainly didn't see any evidence of kind of religious oppression or ethnic oppression. In Urumqi, one sees mosques everywhere. In fact, I believe that Xinjiang has per capita one of the highest number of mosques anywhere in the world. We walked freely, like not just in the tourist areas, not just in the central area. We saw hundreds of Chinese Muslims wearing like distinctive Uyghur clothing, headscarves included for many women, people going about their lives without any indication that they were living like in fear of persecution. We ate in Uyghur restaurants where we had halal foods. When you couldn't have pork there, obviously, you couldn't have alcohol there. So, I mean, what's true is that levels of security in Urumqi are much higher than other places we visited. You walk through metal detectors and you have your bags x-rayed and things like that, which is, of course, a response to the wave of terror attacks starting in the 1990s. But the impression that we got is that people accept that heightened level of security on the basis that, along with other things, along with the poverty alleviation efforts, along with education efforts, it's actually been successful in preventing terrorism and allowing people to live safely and allowing people to live in peace. So that's kind of the big difference that we noticed in in Urumqi compared to, say, Beijing or Xi'an. But certainly, as I said, you can walk around a long time in Urumqi really trying to see some kind of evidence of religious oppression, and you'll be frustrated you won't see that.
The impression from the real trip to China was completely different from what the Western media was portraying when you were like, before you came to China.
Yeah, 100%. For example, you walk around all day in Beijing from one side of the city to another, and if you say anything bad about the Chinese Communist Party, then you're going to be in a prison within 5 minutes. But that's the, it's a ridiculous caricature, but that's actually the idea that people have about China, that it's just an extremely repressive society and that people don't have any kind of individual rights. They have, that there's a human rights crisis in China, whereas actually you've got a tremendous level of individual freedom there, and human rights are improving all the time. And as Kishore Mahbubani, who's a Singaporean diplomat, writes, he's got a book out recently called Has China Won? He says, well, one thing you can say for sure about human rights in China and individual freedoms is that today's Chinese population have much better human rights and much greater individual freedoms than Chinese people have ever had in history. So let's at the very least recognize that even if there are problems, the trajectory is a very positive and a very impressive one.
Like, in what way capitalism is failing in dealing with issues like equality, poverty alleviation, or racism?
Yeah, well, so I told you that in 2019, late in 2019, I went to Beijing for the first time. And in that same year, a few months earlier, I went to New York for the first time. And it's really interesting to see the contrast. The US is one of the world's richest countries, and it's kind of almost the spiritual home of capitalism, if you like. It considers itself as being the quintessential successful advanced capitalist democracy. And yet there's a huge proportion, literally tens of millions of people who live in abject poverty, who don't know where the next meal is coming from. There's hundreds of thousands of people who are homeless, who don't have a roof over their heads. Racism is an enormous problem. Incarceration is an enormous problem. The US has more than 2 million people in prison, which is by far the highest incarceration rate in the world. Their actual incarceration rate, the number of people per capita in prison, is 6 or 7 times higher than it is in China. But the media portrays China as a prison nation, and they portray US as the land of the free. So it's difficult to understand the discrepancy and the contradiction there, because it's, if you were to go on the numbers, if you were to look at the data and the facts, then you would have to say that it's the US that's the prison nation. And while the African American, the Black population only constitutes, I think, around 10% of the US population overall, they constitute between 40 and 50% of the prison population, which gives you a very good indication of how racism runs throughout society. If you look at the homeless population and the population that live in poverty, it's overwhelmingly African American or Latino or indigenous. The treatment of the indigenous peoples of the Americas continues to be utterly horrific. People are herded into reservations. If you look at the difference in life expectancy between indigenous people and white people in the US, it's maybe 15 years difference in life expectancy. There would be mass worldwide hysterical outrage if the difference between the life expectancy for Han Chinese and Uyghurs was 15 years. I mean, but it isn't. So, the capitalism has got these enormous problems that even very wealthy countries can't solve. And as I said to you before, one of the first things we noticed in Beijing, coming from New York and coming from London, is okay, one doesn't see homeless people, one doesn't see people begging on the streets, where I can walk outside of my front door and I would have to go maybe 30 meters before I saw someone that I saw someone who was living on the streets.
To many people, they're probably going to be very surprised knowing there are people like you guys that are outside of China, that are not Chinese, but are willing to speak fight against U.S. government's aggressive actions and statements towards China. And some people probably gonna guess, well, you guys probably are just funded by Chinese government to speak positive things about China. So can you tell us what was the reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably from outside the West, it's difficult to understand how much sort of ideological pressure there is. And there's this mainstream narrative that is able to construct essentially fake news about China. And it's the same process that had people believing that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and that it could attack London or Washington within 45 minutes. These are established methods of building a public consensus to build public support for attack. You know, in this case, in terms of all the kind of basically pretty hysterical propaganda around Xinjiang and around Taiwan and around the South China Sea and around Hong Kong, it's about building support for the new Cold War. It's about building support for this process of military escalations, rearmament of Japan, the placing of the THAAD missile system in Guam and in South Korea, the construction of military bases all around the Pacific. You know, the US has 800 military bases. And you know, their number one target is containing China and preventing a system whereby US hegemony is broken and we move to a more democratic, a multipolar system of international relations. So essentially, the US administration in particular is very much focused on preventing that from happening, and demonizing China and pursuing a new Cold War is a part of that. And Britain in particular is joining in with that, especially after Brexit. We're in a situation where Britain very much needs to have close economic relations with the US. And that essentially means kind of outsourcing its foreign policy and you know, allowing its foreign policy to be written in Washington rather than in London. Yeah, I think the EU, there are still contradictions there in terms of the relationship between continental Europe and China, but the EU is able to act with much more independence because it's much less reliant on the US. But unfortunately, with Britain, you can see in terms of offering the BNO passports to Hong Kong residents, so offering residency to Hong Kong residents.
Hello, Albert. Can you stop the propaganda, please?
Of the 5G infrastructure.
It's just too much. You are just putting on one-sided view.
Well, then you should not listen.
Okay, now let me stop this share first and then enter into discussion. But I do have quite a bit of other videos for you guys. But anyway, let's stop this because I think it's time for discussion. Now, talking about propaganda, let me just put it this way. I know all us is exposed to the Western propaganda, and therefore my role is to provide you with the Chinese propaganda to balance it off a little bit, okay? So I know when you have another point of view which is contrary to your subscribed view, it will be quite difficult to take it in. So I understand that. So just bear with me, and as I present to you, the views there are provided by people voluntarily say what they think is the facts on the ground. So if you can't believe that, nothing I can do. If facts do not change your view, there's nothing I can do. But what I can say is I will try to provide you with some balancing of the propaganda, because we have to understand all media is biased, because every media will have its own point of view, and therefore it's all biased. So what I can do is only present to you some other views.
No, but if China kicked out all the Western journalists, then
if China kick out what?
All the Western journalists, and
Yeah.
they also suppress their own journalists, their own press. There's no press freedom in China. And so what is being promoted is always the Chinese communist view. If we have press freedom within China, we can solve all these problems easily.
Do you really think that?
But you just keep promoting the communist view, helping them, and you don't look at what's actually happening. For instance, in Hong Kong now, what's happening? They should have their freedom until 2047. But now the communists already taken over, and there's no freedom there.
Okay, unfortunately, I can't agree with you. But anyway, let's look at what is really the fact there on the ground. Hong Kong is part of China. Okay? Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China, just like Victoria is part of Australia. Okay, so if anybody calling for a secession of Hong Kong, meaning break Hong Kong away from China, just like we are calling for a secession of Victoria from Australia. What will you think the reaction will be from the federal government's point of view, or from the rest of the Australia point of view will be? They won't agree. Just like
they won't agree, but they won't put people in prison just because they say something like that.
No. Oh, do you really think so? If you argue for the independence of Victoria from Australia, you will be free to do that? I don't think so. I don't think so. Because no government will allow that. Not any government in any part of the world. Look at the you can look at the some of the legislation about, say, foreign spies or the influence of foreign governments of your. Now, no government will allow foreign governments to interfere with their domestic.
No, you changed
policy.
your arguing point, Albert. Come back. You changed your argument point. You're arguing about whether governments will allow people to voice an opinion inside the country, not about what other overseas countries.
Well,
just on a couple of points, I think the Australian journalists weren't kicked out of China. They decided to go. They were probably concerned about maybe being questioned, but they were never kicked out of China. They decided on their own volition to leave. And on the other point, with regard to Hong Kong, I mean, the Chinese aren't silly. USSR was crumbled from the inside by spies destabilising USSR, and it finally collapsed. And the China can see, they're not stupid, they can see the same thing was happening in Hong Kong. There were spies in there destabilising the people, and the Chinese government took action to stop that. And I think what they did, you know, they were virtually terrorists, those people. They were attacking banks and all sorts of things. And I don't think any country can put up with that sort of thing. And they took what action, they took a long while to do it. They were very gradual in their approach, but I think they have to protect their country, and you've got to realise that there's currently it's not a hot war, but it's a cold war between America and China, and they're doing a lot to destabilise America, particularly, in the past, President Trump trying to destabilise China, and I think China are protecting themselves, and I think it's a reasonable thing to do.
I agree with you, Michael.
And I was in China for a long time. We rode bikes around southern China and around Beijing. I never felt threatened. At no stage did I get stopped. I was on the underground by myself and felt quite safe. At no time was I stopped and questioned or photographed or in any way by any Chinese authority. The only time when we went onto the underground, and every time you get onto the underground in China, you have to go through electronic scanners. You have to put your bags in, as we do at airports, because they're frightened of terrorists. And what happened with the Uyghurs, there was a lot of terrorist activities over there. And even in Beijing, they're frightened if that'll happen here, which we don't have that in Australia because we don't have any terrorist threats currently on our underground, thank God. But Chinese obviously do. But that's the only time that I was stopped in any way. And I wasn't threatened at all, but because I knew what was going on.
Yeah, everybody do that as well, because not only you have to put your bags through the X-ray scanner, everybody have to do it. So
everybody going on the underground.
Yeah, so it's not specifically against any person. It's a general security issue. Yes. Yes, please.
Albert.
Sorry. Yeah.
Whose turn is it? Regarding the re-education camps of Uyghurs, are there some camps? How many do you think there are, as far as you understand?
Now, as far as I understand, the re-education camps are now winding down, because I think the Chinese government consider the extreme poverty has already been removed in 2020. So all these re-education camps, which are meant to allow the Uyghurs people who can speak Mandarin to learn some language skills, if they can, and learn some technical skills in order to be more employable. Once, at the moment, I see the Xinjiang region is now quite prosperous, and I would expect Xinjiang's overall financial situation will be improving very fast in the next 10 to 20 years as China put more effort into the One Belt, One Road initiative. Because
I understand there's this, I think it's called the East Turkestan Islam organization that is trying to destabilize some of the Uyghur areas.
Yeah, and then that is Turkestan Muslim, whatever they call, is actually recognized as a tourist group worldwide. It's not just Chinese recognize that group as a terrorist.
Yeah.
It is recognized worldwide. Obviously, China want to keep that group away from China.
Yeah.
Yes. Unfortunately, you want to speak. You have to unmute yourself. You are mute at the moment. Yeah.
I just wanted to say about seceding. Many years ago, some of you will remember there were a family in Western Australia who had a disagreement with the wheat board. And so they seceded from Australia and they set up in the middle of Western Australia a country of their own. And they called, there was a king and a queen and a prince. They all had names. Do you all remember that?
Yeah.
Was it in the 70s? I'm not quite sure.
Yes.
I think it's all being sold. I'm not quite sure. But they certainly were allowed to secede, as ridiculous as it sounds.
Well, when it doesn't seen as a threat to the central government, that's okay. Well, you can go to a little small village in a small town, set up something like that yourself, putting yourself in the clothes of emperor, etc. People just laugh at you and then say, okay, go ahead, do that, stupid. As long as you're not challenging the central government's authority, isn't it? I think that's the same throughout the world. If that little group do not pose as a threat to the people in power, that's okay. But if you do pose as a threat, that's a totally different manner. Just like any country in the world, isn't it?
So in Australia, even seceding can be done, not just talked about. But when you talk about it, government should just put them in prison. That's wrong, right?
There are two points here. One is you discuss it as an academic exercise. Okay, so you go into a political forum in a political environment where you put up alternate form of governments and discuss about the various pros and cons of governments in an academic point of view, citing references, etc. This kind of academic work is carrying on in China all the time in most of the universities in China. So
but in Hong Kong,
okay.
Even the elected legislative councillors, if they talk about something close to secession, not really, but they would already be
I agree.
pursued and put into court proceedings.
Yeah. Now,
so it's just
you take that in
talking, and then it's not allowed.
Yeah, you take that,
and it's in the legislative council.
Yes, I totally agree.
It's a political situation.
No, I'm making this difference, but if you take the idea of secession and then make it into practice, okay, that means especially if you are sponsored by overseas governments, other foreign governments, what do you think? When somebody advocating the independence or secession of a part of a country into independent countries, what do you think will happen? For example, Tasmania. Say there's a group of active people in Tasmania arguing for a secession of Tasmania, break away from Australia. So the main among people in Australia, say we have about 20 million people, let's say around that 20 million, I don't know what is the population of Tasmania. Let's say Tasmania about 10 million.
No, 10,000.
10,000. Okay.
Very small. It's about 200, 300,000.
100,000, a few hundred.
300,000 people want to have a secession. You only talk about it in a theoretical terms, that's okay. But when they are coming out and mobilizing people, what do you think our government will do to those small number of people advocating that? I think they all will be in prison as well.
Well, especially if they were conducting riots and the way the Hong Kong people.
At the moment, the people who are persecuted in China is not persecuted because of their political point of view. It's because they committed a criminal crime. The criminal crime
because they're committing a crime. But if they went through the process of getting a referendum going, we will be allowed to vote on that referendum.
No, in Hong Kong, no. If you,
that is what we're saying. Here in Australia, we will be allowed to vote on that referendum.
But China has a different political system. You can't, just because you don't like that system or we don't like that and we don't agree with that system, doesn't mean they're allowed to have their own system. The people are happy, they're coming out of poverty, they're living a good life the way they have it. There are some limitations you have to have.
I wasn't arguing that point. I was just talking about whether we have the ability to disagree with their government here, and we do. And I don't think they have the ability, the same level of ability to disagree with the government in China.
Yeah.
But Albert, I wanted to get away from this rather contentious area and ask you a different sort of question.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of value in the film and the ideas shown, and I'm sure there's a lot of anti-Chinese propaganda which is far too readily promoted in the West. But China is obviously a well-functioning country where the standard of living is increasing and everybody is far, far better off than they were 10, 20, 40, 50 years ago. It's quite a wealthy, well-to-do nation. Cities are functioning, good, clean, organized. Do you think it should still have a developing country status?
Depending on how you measure wealthiness, okay? In terms of the GDP of China nationwide, the whole Chinese GDP, in terms of the standard GDP, China is about 70% of American, okay? But in terms of population, China is about 4 times the population of America. And that means on a per capita level, Chinese GDP per capita is only a quarter, or no, not even a quarter, let's say 1/5 of that of United States. Now, if you compare that, China is a developing country in terms of the per capita level. But obviously, with a country this large, there will be pockets like Shanghai, Beijing, Xinjiang, etc., well advanced. But at the same time, there will be a large area, mainly the rural area in the middle of the China, in the western part of China. They are still very poor. They are still in that developing country status. So again, this is up to you to decide whether we take the cities as the representation, or you take the whole country as a representation, whether the China is developed or developing. But China do want to become a developed country by its second 100 years anniversary. So that is on 2049. By 2049, China want to be a developed country. Whether they can do it or not, we don't know yet. But they are working towards that.
Albert, getting away from the politics, when I was in Xinjiang, the official time was Beijing time there, which I noticed in for the Muslims, that meant their prayers were kind of at 8:55 at night and that sort of thing. Do you know if it's still, or can they have different time zones in China?
They have the same time zone in all China, unlike here. So
it makes it very strange.
Their evening meal might be 10 o'clock, where it is still bright outside.
They tended to open on their local time and administrate on the Beijing time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're right. They will open up their stores like their local time, but they operate on Beijing time. That's absolutely true.
We can't even get Queensland to do daylight saving.
Well, we have to understand China is a different country. It's very, very different. So I appreciate that we have to understand that different countries do have their own different political system, whether we like it or not. But let them have their system, and then let them develop the way most appropriate to that country. Of course, I left China and becomes an Australian because of the Tiananmen, what happens in Tiananmen in 1989, the June 4th. So I think you understand my position. But at the same time, I like to present to you is an alternate view. I'm not saying this view is absolutely accurate. There are many, many different views, but I know here in Australia, we are only exposed to the Western view. And that's the main reason why I'm presenting to you an alternate view. So that you see there are different people looking at the things in different ways. And that's how I would like to run this course. So yes, the rest of the course is still like that. I'm trying to present to you is a Chinese view, okay? Because I come from China, I understand Chinese, both the Mandarin and the Cantonese, and I come from Hong Kong as well. So Hong Kong is very close to my heart. And therefore, I'm only presenting to you one view. And this is deliberate, okay? I deliberately present to you one view because we all have the other views already in our daily consumption of our media.
And we get the Murdoch view.
Whatever that is. Okay, so next week, I will tell you it will be much less political, okay? This today is very, very political. Okay, next week will not be very political because we will be talking about Chinese effort in terms of achieving the carbon neutral. They claim they will become carbon neutral by 2060, okay? So at the moment, Chinese main energy still come from coal and oil. So how can they do that? So that is the topic for next week. So I look forward to seeing all of you next week.
Albert,
yes.
I wanted to email you recently, and I did, but I didn't get a response. Maybe I haven't got your email address. Do you mind giving that out?
Yep. Okay. Can you have a piece of paper?
Yeah.
Okay. Albert, ALBERT.
Yeah.
Albert, can you just put it in the general chat?
Okay, I'll put it on the chat. Okay. There's a number of messages in the chat. I haven't been reading it, so I'm sorry about that. So I will type that out.
Type it out. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that was my email address. Okay. Everybody see it now? albert.ip.w.c@gmail.com.
Oh, lost it.
Okay, so anybody like to address, send me an email, you're welcome to do so. But
sorry, here we are. IP, WC.
Yeah, W.C. Okay, the W.C is my initial from my Chinese, my real name. Albert is not in my passport. Okay, anyway, now if you guys like to look at some of my other lectures on the series of China Today, you can go on YouTube to search for Albert Yip English channel. I put all my lectures on China Today on YouTube as well. So anyway, thank you so much for your attention today, and see you next week.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. See you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.